Hey guys, so Frontier released their toolkit for importing custom objects into Planet Coaster. And I've been spending some time learning how to do it correctly. There is an official manual for this user guide, and I'll be sharing the link to this down below. But there are a bunch of things that are not currently explained clearly or correctly when it comes to Blender. So I figured make a short tutorial on how to get an object from Blender, set up and exported correctly into Planet Coaster. So I'm going to be using Blender 2.7b or 7.9b, which is the latest version, I believe, but they support any version of 2.79 at the moment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to tell you guys how to create models or texture in Blender. There's a lot of other tutorials out there that will teach you how to do that. So first thing is you're going to have your model finished, and you're also going to want to have it UV mapped. And I'm just going to show you here. If I go up here to this top right corner here and click and drag, I can make a new window. I'm going to change this here to UV in the image editor. And if I go into edit mode of my hexagon here, you can see that this is my UV map for my hexagon. So I've already done and created a UV map. I'm not going to tell you guys how to do that. You guys will have to find another tutorial. But what I will do is I'll tell you the rest of it after you've created your model and it's all set up and ready to go. So the first thing you need to do is you need to create a Hitcheck model. Now I've already done that up here, and it's called Hitcheck_01, and I'm going to show that. So this Hitcheck model is just a box, and they should generally be just a box. What a Hitcheck is for is it does several things. It defines where the object can stack on top of each other and collide with each other. So it will kind of affect how things are placed. It'll also be defined on how guests path around an object. So if there's a big Hitcheck in the way, guests will try to walk around it. And it'll also decide where objects can't intersect with rides unless you have the no collision option turned off in the game settings. So it's for a few things. Now I've opted to make my Hitcheck a little bit smaller than my object. It just makes it a little bit easier for placing these hexagons next to each other. It's just kind of a personal preference for how the object collides or gives leeway for collisions. So this is my preference. Most of the time, though, you'll have a box that goes all the way around your object. Now, you actually don't need to make this. You can actually not have a Hitcheck at all in your file, and the game will automatically generate one for you. So you don't have to do that. It's just if you do create one, it will be a little bit more customizable and maybe behave a little bit more as expected. The other thing is you can have up to 4 of these. You can have Hitcheck 01, 02, 03, and 04, and all define different spaces and kind of shapes. Usually they'll all be boxes or really simple objects. Read more about that in the manual, but you could at least stack boxes in different ways to make a little bit nicer shape if you have a really complicated object that needs to collide with things in a weird way. But you don't even have to make one. So if you're confused by all of that of the Hitcheck, don't make one. I forgot something, so I come from the future to cut in. The other thing you need to make sure to do is you want to select your model, go to materials here, and make sure your object has a material assigned in Blender. So it might be like this. you would just create a new material and name it something like hex. It's really important that you remember what you name it. Something that's confusing to a lot of people is that you don't need to apply any textures to your object in Blender itself. You just need to have this named the same as your texture files. So, and I'll explain more of that later. Next step is our object needs to have 6 different levels of level of detail. Levels of level of detail, yes. So what we need to do here is go to hexagon, and I'm going to double click here in the outliner and rename this hexagon underscore L0 for level 0. And now level 0 is our full resolution, highest quality version of the object. And what we do is we create several different versions of this level of detail that get less and less detailed as we go on. So I'm going to press Shift D and to duplicate my hexagon, and I'm going to right click to snap it back into place. And that's important. All the LODs should be in the exact same place, or you'll get some funny jittering around when you're in the game. So in the same place, and we're going to rename this L1. Now L1 should be less detailed, but while you're testing or learning, you don't need to make these less detailed. The game, the toolkit will export fine and load the object fine in the game without having these be less detailed. They can all be exact copies. Now, if you have, once you finalize your model, once you release the final version, or before you release the final version, you should go and make sure that all your LODs get less and less detailed, because that will help the game run better. Because if your object, basically what it will do is as your object gets further and further away in the camera of the game, it will use less and less detail. So it'll make the game run faster, and you don't need to see as much detail when you're further away. Now for my hexagon, it is so low detail to begin with. There's so few vertices and faces. See, it's just 12 and 20. That I don't need to reduce my LODs at all, even for the final version. And in the manual, it kind of suggests that if your object is fewer than something, that you don't even need to worry about it. Less than 64 triangles is what it suggests. But otherwise, the manual here gives a good overview in modeling about what percentage of detail each level should be. So level 0 being 100%, and this one can be anywhere from 60 to 80%, and so on. So this is a good guide. So I don't need to worry about creating a lower level of detail, but if you did want to do that, there are better tutorials out there for creating LODs, but a simple way of doing it is going into the modifier tab, adding a modifier, and adding the decimate modifier. And your percentage is your ratio here. So if you want to make this 80% as detailed, you change the ratio here to 0.8. And you could keep on doing that. Create a new copy and change the ratio to 0.6 or whatever the next step is. Yeah, 0.6 and 0.4 and 0.2 and 0.1 or whatever you wanted to do in between. And probably at the end of that, you want to apply this modifier. Though in the final export state, there is an option that will auto apply these for you. But I'm not going to do this. I'm just going to close this. I'm not going to decimate my model. It's fine how it is. So I'm just going to make new 6 versions of the model. So Shift D, right click to move it back. Shift D, right click, so on and so forth, until we get to 05 here. So we want 0 to 5. So we have a total of 6, including 0. So we're going to change the names here so that this is L2, L3, L4, L5. I created one extra that I didn't need, so I'm going to delete this one by pressing X and delete. Okay, so now I have L0 to L5. Okay, now we're almost done. Okay, now what we need to do is make sure that our object is in the right scale. So what I mean by that is if we go to the Scene tab here, we can see our units. And I've already set my units. Well, no, I haven't actually. My units are none right now. But I want them to be centimeters. And you can do that by going here. Normally this will say unit presets or something. And you can click unit presets. And you can change this. You can click on centimeters. And it will change. What that does is it changes this to metric and this to 0.01. So you can also just change this to you can just change these options to those values. These are just presets. But what's important is that if you did this before creating your model, you're good, you're golden. But if you haven't, if you just changed this now after you created your model, like most people would, including myself, I only learned that this was the correct setting after making my model, you're going to have to scale things up because now my hexagon is 2 centimeters across, whereas I wanted it to be 2 meters across. So it's 100 times too small. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scale everything up 100 times. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to press Shift C. And what that does is it puts my 3D cursor in the center of the world, or the world origin at 0, 0, 0 here. And the second thing I'm going to do is go here to this pivot center option, and I'm going to change the pivot center to 3D cursor. And what this is going to do is it's going to let me scale things off of the world axis. So everything is scaling from the same place. Now I'm going to press B and box select, click and drag everything. And I'm going to make sure that all my objects that I want are selected here. The other thing is, this happened to me before. I want to make sure that these scales aren't locked. And I don't know why these are locked for me. But at some point they became locked. So I'm going to go through each of them and I make sure they're unlocked so that they're going to let me scale. So I'm going to do that again. Press B, select all my objects. They're all selected. Okay. Now, if I press S to scale, and I just type in 100 in the keyboard and press Enter, you'll see that it set the scale to 100 in all directions. And my dimension is now 2 meters across. So this is your final check. You want to make sure that if you click on an object, the dimensions that say here make sense to you. Now, another thing, I want to select all my objects again, or make sure they're still selected. And I'm going to go Control A and click on rotation and scale. So this applies the rotation and scale because if you'll, so if you notice that before I applied it, this said 100, and after I apply it, it just says 1. And for this to work properly, these scales have to all be reset back to 1 by doing this. So now all my objects should be at scale 1 and the correct dimensions. Good. Now we are finally ready for the last step of exporting here. We need to rotate this because as is, this will actually get imported upside down and turned around when it's in the game. Something wonky is with the Blender exporter right now, so I haven't figured our way around doing this. So what we have to do here is make sure that our 3D cursor is in the center point again by Shift C, and make sure that this center point, pivot point, is still the 3D cursor. I'm going to make sure that all my objects are selected. I'm going to press R and then X and then -90, -90. That rotates my object 90 degrees in the X axis, and I'm going to click Enter. Then I'm going to do R again. This time I'm going to press Y and then 180 and enter. Now your object should be pointing so that its top, what you want facing upwards, is actually pointing in the direction of this green arrow, or the Y axis. And the front of your object should be pointing up in the Z axis. So you might have to rotate your object a little bit differently depending on where it started, but as long as that's true for your object at the end here, you're good. So green is the top and blue Z is your front, what you want to have facing you when you place it. So my object should kind of place like this in the world now. Okay, so now that we've done that, very important step is we need to go Shift A again, or sorry, we need to press Control A again, and we need to click Rotation and Scale, because our rotation is set here and we want this to be zeroed out. So Control A, apply rotation and scale. Okay, this is zeroed out. So rotation is zeroed out, scale is at 1 for all of our objects. Good, that's what we want, and our scale is correct. Now we can finally do the last step of exporting this. So I'm going to press B and select everything, make sure everything's selected. And we're going to go to File, Export, FBX. And we're going to change some settings here that are really important. So down here in Export FBX are your settings. And we want to change this version from FBX 7.4 binary to FBX 6.1 ASCII. Now I've selected all my objects I want to export, so I'm going to click on this checkbox to only export the things that I have selected. If you don't have anything else in your scene, you can leave this unchecked, but it might be useful just to make sure that nothing else is exported other than what you want or what you have selected. Next, you want to change this forward to Y forward and up to Z up, which it's already changed here. Yes, I know we just rotated things around so that Z is forward and Y is up and all that, but yes, like I said, Blender's export is a little bit weird, so just trust me that we have to change this to that setting. Here, we don't need to worry about this too much, but just to make extra certain that we don't export anything we don't want, we're going to click on Only Mesh here. So these are the things that are exporting, and we only need the meshes, so that's good. Apply modifiers is fine to keep on. Now, our object doesn't have animations, so I'm going to uncheck this. But if your object does have animations, you can keep this on. But there's whole more things to keep in mind for animated objects that I'm not going to get into, but you can look through the manual to learn about that. So these are the only settings we need to change. ASCII, Y forward, Z up, and really that's the most important things. The mesh thing and the selected objects are just to make sure that we don't export more than we need if we had anything else, which we don't, but you might in your case. So now I can choose a place to save this. So I'm going to go into this folder and I'm going to just keep it at hex FBX. Okay, so here is our FBX file that we exported. And here are my texture files that I have created in the past that fit with the UV map of this object. But, like I said before, these textures are not applied in any way to this material in Blender. All that I need to do is I need to make sure that this is named the same name as the material in Blender. So it was named hex in Blender. And then underscore BC, or whatever type of material this texture is. So if we look at the Toolkit guide again, the materials tab here will give you an overview of all the kinds of materials that you can use. So whatever it is, it's the name of your material underscore whatever your material is. So as long as you stick to that format, you'll be golden. Now we have all the files we need to make a package to upload to Planet Coaster. So I'm going to select all these. I'm going to right click and I'm going to send it to a zip file called hex. Doesn't really matter what it's called, but that makes sense to me. All right, so now we're going to upload our model into Thememaker's Toolkit. So you can go to themakers-toolkit.planetcoaster.com or just search for Planet Coaster Thememaker's Toolkit. And I've already logged in and all that. You have to sign in through your Steam account. Then you go to your Create New Item. You're going to want to give details for your object. Let me just maximize this. So the item name, I had used, say, hexagon 1 or 2 meters medium, but you can name your object whatever makes sense to you. Give it a description. This is just a test. Category here. So make sure to find a category that most relates to yours. I'm going to go to Scenery, Art, Shapes, Flat. Theme is limited here. Honestly, until they expand this, unless your object matches one of these exactly, I would just stick with Planet Coaster. Scenery type is whether or not you want this object to create a grid or not, and I don't, so I'm going to click Simple. Create a price for it. These scenery objects, these art objects are usually really cheap, so I'm going to press type in $2. Running cost really should be 0 unless it's an animated object that you think, you know, might require maintenance or something. But please don't make a huge running cost for your static objects. I've seen a bunch of them on the workshop that have a silly running cost, which is fine for sandbox players, but not for people who play with money. So the other thing we want to do here is go get our zip package. So we've got our zip, and we're going to click and drag this here. Now it's also going to ask for a preview image. So it's different from your icon file, which I included in my zip file. Your icon is what shows up in the game. And this is a terrible icon. I made a better one for my final hex, but your preview image really can be whatever you want. It's just for you. So my preview image is this, which is almost exactly the same, but hey, it could be the same object even if you want. It's just for you. Just for you. So sound type is just for when you place or move around the object. I think I chose stone for this last time, and that's what the other art pieces use. So, and this is kind of how far the sound will travel. So not really important choices. If you have flexi color masks in your object, these are where you select your default colors. So, you know, you can set them. This is a little buggy. I've found that I've sometimes had to resubmit the same object twice, kind of resetting the flexi color each time. I'm not sure what the way around it is, but maybe just set your colors and set them all, even if you don't need them all. Just kind of move things around, confirm. Can't be sure that that does anything, but either you have to mess around with this a few times to get it to save, or you have to resubmit it twice to get it to save. I'm not sure what did it, but just letting you know it's a little buggy at the moment. So that's it. when we're finished with this item, it would be good to have a way better description than this, but for now, this is just a test. So let's click submit, and it's going to upload. So it's going to say uploading, and it's going to say uploading. It might say in queue, and this could take a while depending on how complicated your item is. The cool thing is if you are doing this, and if you're in game, if you're playing Planet Coaster, you can keep on playing in Planet Coaster, and Planet Coaster will actually give you a little notification in the top of your screen saying when this has finished building. So I thought that was a pretty cool feature that they implemented. All right, so our hexagon is now complete. And now it gives us a download button here. Now, if it encountered any errors, it will give you error messages, and you can look what those errors are in the user guide here in error descriptions. A lot of the time, well, either if it's something like UGC artifact upload failed and all those things, no config or something, a pre-build failed, and no other errors, just a bunch of those random ones, sometimes that's just a bug, and just try it again. If the, oh god, this is the test one. If the error is something like LODs missing, well, then you didn't have all of your LODs selected when you exported them, or you didn't make them all. You can, yeah, look up more of the errors on the user guide or search the forums. But now this is finished without any errors. We're going to click download. And we're going to want to save this in Documents. Frontier Developments. Planet Coaster. TMT for Thememaker's Toolkit. And now this name here will be by default what you named it. And you can see that I've already got this object in here. And these are my final versions that I've actually uploaded to the workshop already. So I'm going to name this something else like test. This won't be the name of your object in the game. It'll just let me have two of the same objects without interfering with each other. So I'm going to just name that something different and click save. Now we can go into the game, and we can go to our toolkit items, and we can click on refresh. And that's the cool thing, you can keep this game open and just refresh this whenever you add something new. So these two here are my final versions. You can see they have a different icon, but this is our test one that we're just made here. So I'm going to click on this, and it comes in flat on the ground just like we want, and we can click on it and build it, and we can change the color. So see, it came in white there, even though we changed the default color to something else. So I don't know, might have to resubmit it again to get that default color to work. So, but anyways, we can change it and it works. Now, if you have any issues with rotating objects and having them look weirdly lit, this one's fine. But if you're having any weird lighting artifacts, it's because you probably used the wrong export settings. You either didn't have the right units, or you used the wrong settings in one way or the other. So make sure your settings are right. Export again, upload again if you're having any lighting issues. But this is all good. Oh, one last thing, guys. When you're finally happy with your object and everything's good, you've changed the description to be nice, you've changed your LODs to go down in detail and all that, and you're finally ready, you can click on your object and go up here and click Upload to Steam. And this will prompt you to create a new workshop item, take a screenshot, and upload this to the workshop. I'm not going to do this because I've already made the final version, but this is how you get your item actually onto the workshop, and that's the final step if you want to share it with the workshop. Otherwise, you can just share the file that you downloaded from the website with other people personally if you want, or just keep it for yourself. And that's it, guys. That's all you need to do. Please let me know if I helped you, and post any questions you have. Thanks, guys. Bye.